Hello everyone, this is Tyler here at Formidable, a true crime podcast. I want to invite you to come join me as I drop multiple episodes weekly to give you your true crime fix. Now, I am personally a huge fan of true crime, and this is what has pushed me to do this. All of my stories are well researched, but I do keep them shorter than your average true crime podcast to fit into your daily commute, so you don't have to pick back up later. I encourage you to check it out anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. Just search Formidable, a true crime podcast, and while you're there, be sure to subscribe, follow, and leave a review if you enjoy. You can also find me on Twitter at FormidableTC and on Instagram at Formidable.
I'm Roseanne, host of the California Dreaming Podcast, a true crime show that delves into the darker side of California. Join me each week as we take a tour of the beautiful beaches, majestic mountain ranges, expansive deserts, and soaring redwoods to discover some of the most chilling, fascinating, and depraved criminal acts that have taken place across the state. You can find California Dreaming on all of your favorite podcast directories, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or you can visit our website at www.orbitaljigsaw.com and click on the show's link to find hours and hours of true crime tales from the Golden State. Thank you and sweet dreams.
Hello there everyone, and welcome to the True Crime Grapple Show. I'm your host Dan, and this is episode 20. So, I remember not so long ago when I started this show, and I had so many stop-starts in between episodes, and I remember thinking to myself, if I can just make it to 10 shows, I'll have achieved something with it. And here we are, we're at number 20. It's another little milestone for our little show, and I just want to take the time or the opportunity to thank everyone for the support. I'm glad to have you all on board. And by the way, what about episode 19? If you haven't checked that out, then I recommend you go back and do so, and while you're at it, check out the rest of the archives that are there. We've got some top episodes on the sad death of James Bulger, the KFC murders, the crazy stalker that was Maria Marchese, the Basco massacre, many more. And you can get involved over at our Facebook, God, can't even talk now, our Facebook page. Come and join the conversations and polls we have on the page, and we'd love to have you there. So on Facebook, just search for @TrueCrimeGrapple and request to join the page, and we'll accept you, and then you can come on and have your input there, and that'll be great. Also, I put up a bonus episode that last week, which features True Crime Grapple writer Jim Pitts as we talk over episode 19. That was the episode No One Wins Tonight. Now, usually this would be a Patreon-only episode, but we wanted to give you all a free taste of what to expect over there, so please check that out. Now, enjoy the show, and if you can, get onto Apple Podcasts or iTunes and give the show a nice rating and review. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Show today is written by Lauren Daryani. Welcome back, Lauren. It's narrated by me, Dan Kelton, and the music and editing is, you can edit that out, is by Baba Beats. So settle in, because it's time to lock your door. Sit back and relax, because it is true crime time. Belize, Aruba, Praia de Luz, Acapulco. For many, these locations may generate images of glamorous, once-in-a-lifetime vacations in the midst of exotic landscapes. For others, they can represent vulnerability and uncertainty in a foreign environment fraught with dangers. Murders and disappearances are nothing new to popular tourist destinations, as news stories periodically tend to remind its viewers. It's sometimes too easy to be distracted by new surroundings and people, and taking a vacation puts us in the mindset that is determined to abandon the concerns of our daily lives back home. Unfortunately, letting our guards down in unfamiliar territory can be a way to welcome more sinister forces that lie in wait abroad. That had been the case of Mark Kilroy. Only those forces lying in wait were more sinister than one could ever have imagined. A pre-med student from Santa Fe, Texas, Mark took a trip with close friends to Rio Grande Valley to partake in spring break festivities everywhere from South Padre Island in the east to the Mexican border town of Matamoros in the west. Initially caught amid the energy of the crowd, it took a momentary glimpse away by his friends before Mark seemed to disappear out of nowhere from the streets of Mexico. It would be the last time Mark's friends would ever see him again. In the state of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, or often simply called the Valley, is a 5,000 square mile triangular region located at the southernmost tip of the state and including 4 counties. The valley hugs the northern bank of the Rio Grande River for miles, roughly from Salinino to the Gulf Coast. There's a unique shared culture in the valley, where the identities of Texan and Mexican often blend seamlessly. Spanglish is spoken, Mexican youths play baseball, and Tex-Mex cuisine is plentiful, and time moves slowly. Because of its large coverage along the Rio Grande, much of the Rio Grande Valley is in close proximity to border towns of Mexico. One of the most important pairs of cities sharing a border consists of Brownsville, Texas, and Matamoros, located in the Mexican state of Tamaulipas. Both are linked by the Gateway International Bridge, located just a block or so from the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley on the Texas side. With the humid subtropical climate that warms the sand along the blue coastal beaches, the resort town of South Padre Island has long been a favourite valley destination for both Texans and non-Texans alike. The town provides a unique geographical setting for beachgoers. Its 113-mile length makes up part of a longer barrier island of the same name and is roughly no wider than 2 miles across. For miles, the island town runs parallel to the Texas mainland, separated by a lagoon known as Laguna Madre. The way to South Padre Island to the mainland is via a causeway that takes you through Laguna Madre and into Port Isabel. Continuing on the freeway, this brings you to the Texas-Mexico border. It has been estimated that hundreds and thousands make their way annually to this part of the state during vacation seasons, especially for spring break. While an overwhelming number are from the surrounding areas in Texas, many college students pour in from all corners of the country in a pursuit of a week of youthful hedonism among their spring semester studies back home. South Padre Island tends to lead a double life, both as destination and as home base for further excursions. Aside from the warm beaches, comfortable resorts and laid-back atmosphere, South Padre Island is also sought out due to its proximity to Mexico. A 40-minute drive southwest from the island can take drivers to Brownsville and over the bridge to Matamoros. Matamoros is one of the fastest growing cities as a major hub for Mexico's industrial sector, fueled by the terms of the North American Free Trade Agreement. Its boomtown nature had evolved from its history as a major agricultural settlement and began catering to college students looking to enjoy their school vacations since as far back as the 1930s. The town provided foreign visitors a variety of entertainment in the form of restaurants, bars, nightclubs, and other rowdy events. The lax drinking laws and access to cheap drinks made the Mexican border a favourite party spot. However, aside from the party atmosphere and the optimism of youth that was fostered, there was a darker side to those border towns, and to Matamoros in particular. Crime and poverty were unforgivingly rampant, and as the violence surrounding the drug trade near Mexico's borders intensified, so had fear grown in many would-be tourists for their own safety. Disappearances, murder, and corruption were facts of life along the border as cartels gained a foothold in Texas. Throughout the years, Mexico's violent and merciless drug trafficking culture had begun to integrate the element of the unknown into its inner workings. Ritual and symbolism steeped in the tradition of the Catholic Church and folk religion came in the form of prayers to narco saints such as Jesus Malverde and San Ramon Nonato. Protection from the law or from incrimination in a crime were common reasons to pray to these figures. In this way, criminals would feel invincible before the law. Mark himself was familiar with the Catholic Church, having been raised in the faith by his parents. However, the faith practice within Mexico's narco culture would have been totally foreign to him. As authorities would investigate Mark's disappearance and later discovery, it would become clear that they were dealing with an altogether different breed of believer whose faith is almost incomprehensible. Caught off his guard, Mark would get ensnared in a world where power and ancient superstition collided so violently that his fate is still discussed decades later. Mark James Kilroy was born on March 5, 1968 in Chicago, Illinois to James, a chemical engineer, and Helen, a volunteer paramedic. After Mark's birth, the family made a major move from the American Midwest to the Gulf Coast region. For the next 15 years, Mark was raised with his younger brother Keith in the small, middle-class town of Santa Fe, located nearly 40 miles southwest of Houston, Texas. The Kilroy family were actively religious and would frequently drive to the nearby town of Hitchcock to participate in mass services at Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic Church. Mark Kilroy was a tall and clean-cut young man who was kind and well liked by many. His faith reflected that of his family. He served as an altar boy during religious rites at his family's church, and his father James fondly recalled how he caught him forgoing school studies to read the Bible instead. He steered clear of drugs and was called an above-average kind of guy, the kind of guy a girl wouldn't hesitate to introduce to her parents. Mark would also prove his academic and leadership excellence as a Boy Scout, an honours student, and a member of the Student Council in Santa Fe High School. He won awards in math and science. His athletic abilities there were well noted, and he would often spend time with his classmates competing on the school basketball, baseball and golf teams. Ranking 14th out of a class of over 200 students by his 1986 high school graduation, no one doubted that Mark's future looked bright. Mark's journey through college would take him from Santa Fe further into the heart of Texas, beginning with his enrollment at Southwest Texas State University in the college town of San Marcos. He later travelled to Stephenville, where he transferred to Tarleton State University on a basketball scholarship and joined the Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity. Eventually, Mark opted out of the life of sports in order to embark on a career in medicine instead. After 2 years at Tarleton, he made his way back to the Texas Hill Country, where he transferred to the University of Texas at Austin as a pre-med student preparing for the medical college admission test. The spring of 1989 at the University of Texas would signify the second semester of Mark's junior year as a pre-med student, so the coming spring break would be a welcome relief from the grueling academic schedule, especially as he made the decision to spend it vacationing with his friends at the Texas-Mexico border. With talks of their plans having continued as early as the start of the previous semester, their trip couldn't have come soon enough. The plan was to make it to South Padre Island for what was known as Texas Week, when young people from colleges all over the state would come down to celebrate the break. From there, they would drive to Brownsville, where they would leave their car and make their way across the bridge into Mexico to party in Matamoros. Mark's friendship with Bill, Bradley, Brent and Ryan stood the test of time and distance. They had been teammates on the Santa Fe High School basketball and baseball teams together, having known each other as far back as childhood. Each went their separate ways as they enrolled in different colleges, but their communication with each other was continuous, with calls made to one another at least twice a week. While South Padre Island wasn't a new spring break destination among the young men, it would be the first time they would be vacationing there together. With a nearby drive to Matamoros providing more uninhibited festivities in the evening, it was the perfect way to reunite and catch up with one another over beers, girls, and talk of life in general. As the break was coming up, a last-minute change of plans for Ryan brought their party from 5 down to 4. Friday, March the 10th would kick off spring break for Bradley, who finished his exams early at Texas A&M University. From Bryan, Texas, he drove to Austin to pick up Mark and then on to Santa Fe to meet up with Bill and Brent. From there, they would take Brent's car to make it the rest of the way. Shortly after midnight, they embarked on their 9-hour journey southward along the fog-heavy Texas coast. The friends reached their destination by mid-morning of Saturday, March the 11th, the Sheraton Hotel and Resort on the South Padre Island. After a shower and some food, the friends went to the beach. The boys were early for spring break festivities, having arrived in the opening weekend. The beaches and the streets hadn't yet been overtaken by the crowds of people, but the chaos would make its way over the bridge from Port Isabel on the Texas mainland and build over the course of the island's spring break season, which lasted for 5 weeks. Beer companies were gearing up to sponsor the countless forms of entertainment that would cater to nearly 250,000 young spring breakers. Free concerts and movies and free use of the swimming pools were offered to visitors in exchange for an appearance in a TV commercial, and surf simulator activities were held. Mark and Bradley used the free phone line to reach their parents and let them know that they had made it to the island safely. Later in the night, they met up with some girls from Indiana's Purdue University who roomed next door to them, and they partied into the early morning hours, after which they made it safely to their hotel room to rest up for the next day's events. By Sunday, March the 12th, Mark and his friends were teasing out a general daily routine. From their waking hours until lunch, they would spend the early morning suntanning at the beach. After lunch, they would head to a patch of beach behind the Sheraton to watch the Miss Tan Line contest, which was held daily. By late afternoon, they would try and get a nap in before going back out for a night of revelry across the border. On this evening, they took the bridge off of South Padre Island heading in the direction of Matamoros. They touched down in Port Isabel, where they had dinner at a Sonic drive-in and ran into a group of 4 girls visiting from the University of Kansas. They were on their way to Matamoros as well, and they followed the young men for over 20 miles to the border town of Brownsville, where they would park their cars near the Gateway International Bridge before joining the many youths walking across it into Mexico. Mark and his friends spent most of the evening socialising with the Kansas students at the Sgt. Pepper's nightclub before going their separate ways again. By 2:30 in the morning, they were headed back to South Padre Island. On Monday, March 13th, Mark and his friends picked up their routine again. They attended another Miss Tan Line contest near their hotel and then caught a nap. In the early evening, Mark attended a condo party being thrown by his former frat brothers from his days at Tarleton State University. By 10:30 p.m, the friends parked their car near the Gateway International Bridge in Brownsville and headed on foot to Matamoros for a second time. The town's main street, Avenida Alvaro Obregón, was teeming with 15,000 American visitors moving from bar to restaurant to club, looking to enjoy a night of drinking for dirt cheap and without the legal repercussions they would have expected in the United States. Each bar, restaurant and club competed with one another to lure tourists in with drink specials and other perks. Once Mark and his friends stepped off the bridge, they didn't care to waste any time. They sought out the bar with the shortest waiting line and found Los Sombros, which poured out neon and rock music. The bar, which renamed itself Rock Cafe for the spring break, likely to appeal to more American would-be patrons, hosted an even more rambunctious crowd. As revellers made mischief and threw beer over the balconies, Mark stayed near the bar where he struck up a conversation with a few girls. Monday turned into Tuesday, March 14th, and by 2 in the morning, Bill had the idea to call it a night. As they were leaving the bar to make the 15-minute walk over the Rio Grande and back to Brent's car, Mark's friends saw that he had beaten them outside. They found him leaning against a Volkswagen and talking to a girl who had gotten 3rd place in the Miss Tan Line competition back in South Padre Island. Mark and his friends tried to walk as a cohesive group through the street, but with thousands of people moving in every direction, it was easy to get swept up in the crowd and separated from friends. Bradley and Brent led the group and headed toward a popular location called Garcia's, a combination of a restaurant and a gift shop. Mark and the girl from the Miss Tan Line's competition stopped near the steps of a house along the main avenue and said their goodbyes. After parting ways, Mark waited for Bill to catch up with him. Mark asked Bill if there was something wrong, and Bill told him that he wasn't in the mood to party. While they lagged behind their other friends, Bill got the urge to urinate, so he ducked away from the crowd for a moment to relieve himself in a more secluded spot. It was at this point that Bill got a glimpse of a man who called out to Mark, asking something to the effect of, quote, "Don't I know you from somewhere?" or "Didn't I just see you?" Another person seemed to recall seeing Mark that night possibly talking to a man who beckoned him into his truck. When Bill re-emerged, Mark was gone. He went to catch up with his friends who were waiting at Garcia's, but Mark wasn't with Brent or Bradley either. Bill yelled, quote, "Hey Mark, stop fucking around." But there was no response, and no sign of him anywhere. Their friend seemed to have vanished into thin air. Mark's friends would spend hours looking for him and retracing their steps as establishment after establishment closed into the early morning and as crowds on the streets thinned out to nearly nothing. It wasn't like Mark to up and leave his friends without saying anything, not even to spend the evening flirting with a girl as he had done earlier. There was the possibility that he'd already crossed the bridge and was waiting for them by the car. When they didn't find Mark by the car, the young men headed back to the Sheraton on South Padre Island, entertaining the idea that he could have caught a ride with someone going in the same direction as him. When he arrived back at the hotel and woke up still with no sign of Mark, they knew something wasn't right. They immediately contacted the police to report their friend missing. Mark's friends returned to Matamoros again with United States custom agents to retrace their steps the night Mark vanished. Disappearances were nothing new in the city. Students were easily among those reported, but many would turn up after several days with nothing worse than a nasty hangover. Unfortunately, others weren't so lucky. It was 1989, and only 3 months into the year, 60 individuals disappeared without a trace in Matamoros. Mark Kilroy was one of them. Compared to the many other reported disappearances, Mark's case received relatively considerable attention in the United States, partially because of his uncle's ties to the government through his work with the Customs Office in Los Angeles, but also because of the massive search effort on both sides of the Rio Grande. From the beginning, the Mexican federal government gave 100%, vowing to help their US counterparts, pairing their own agents with them as they moved through Matamoros together to question any possible witnesses and informants and to investigate any leads that came in. The US authorities recognised this dedication by the Mexican Federal Police and heaped praise on them. They were much less trusting of Mexican law enforcement at the state and municipal levels, who seemed to withhold information and move slowly. It gave the impression that there might have been cooperative links between local officers and those responsible for Mark's disappearance. His friends already denied the claim of Matamoros police that he went missing on the American side of the bridge, presumably in order not to hamper their city's tourism and overall reputation. The Matamoros police interrogated 127 known criminals, many of whom were fugitives being held in jail. Not one had seen Mark or known anything about him. In further searching for clues, investigators sought out the services of a hypnotist, and the session seemed to yield some information. Under hypnosis, Mark's friends confirmed that there was a strange man who called Mark over to him and asked if they knew each other. The description of him was brief but helpful. He was a young Hispanic man who wore a blue plaid shirt and had a visible cut or scar on his face. None of the three friends could pinpoint the precise time or place that Mark actually disappeared, but foul play was highly suspected in any case. From the sound of the boys' accounts, it seemed like Mark could have been kidnapped for ransom, but as time passed, with no calls or messages demanding any kind of payment, the possibility began to fade gradually. Robbery, of course, was another possibility. While the city brought in lots of revenue from visitors, it wasn't without its fair share of poverty and property crime. Yet drug-related violence was an even more likely explanation, given its ubiquitous and unapologetic presence throughout Mexico, and particularly amongst communities near the United States border. 4 years earlier, American undercover DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena had been abducted by drug traffickers in broad daylight after a major raid by the Mexican army on a Chihuahuan marijuana plantation. He had been suspected of providing the information that led to the raid, and he was later found murdered after many hours of torture. The memory of Camarena's murder was still in the back of people's minds, and local law enforcement agencies in both countries found no reason to conjure it up. They believed Mark's body was likely dumped in a remote area, yet all-terrain vehicles and helicopters operated by Border Patrol searched the Rio Grande and its surroundings only to turn nothing up in the end. Once they were notified that Mark had gone missing, James and Helen Kilroy were worried sick. They made their way from Santa Fe to Mexico to lead a tireless search for their son. Tens of thousands of flyers were distributed on both sides of the border and throughout Rio Grande Valley by dozens of people, imploring anyone with knowledge of Mark's disappearance to come forward and speak to the authorities. James personally passed out flyers bearing his son's photograph near the Gateway International Bridge, hoping to spark some recognition in any passerby. The family made an appearance on a television newscast asking for the help in finding their son or providing any relevant information. In the meantime, hundreds of tips poured in by telephone. The tenacity and strength of the Kilroy family were admired by many, and they gained many friends and supporters through the dogged pursuit of answers regarding Mark's whereabouts. They would form an especially close bond with coach Joe Rodriguez, who would go on to serve as an athletics administrator for the Brownsville Independent School District. During their search miles away from Santa Fe, he provided a place in his home for the Kilroy family to stay. He helped to raise a $10,000 reward with the help of the local businesses in the community. Rodriguez also made trips to Matamoros to speak with everyone from security guards to more unsavoury individuals to glean any possible information about Mark's disappearance. The Kilroys stayed in constant communication with local law enforcement. They spent days on end at the Cameron County Sheriff's Department, pleading with authorities, particularly with then Lieutenant George Gavito, to help find their son, since they knew that the only entity with the jurisdictional power to commence a formal investigation in Mexico was the Mexican government itself. Texas officials who had gotten involved, along with San Antonio's Mayor Henry Cisneros, put pressure on Mexican authorities to help find the young man who went missing within their jurisdiction. The mayors of Brownsville and Matamoros coordinated with law enforcement on both sides of the Rio Grande River. Lieutenant Gavito and US Customs Special Agent Orrin Neck made trips to Matamoros where shantytowns and neighbourhoods ravaged by crime came under focus. Soon the effort to look for Mark moved beyond the local sphere. The Kilroys met with key Texas officials such as Senator Lloyd Bentsen, Attorney General Jim Mattox, and Governor William Clements to ask for help in the case. They had talks with Americo Villarreal Guerra, then Governor of Tamaulipas, in hopes of getting more residents of Matamoros involved in Mark's disappearance. Attorney General Mattox approved of Lieutenant Gavito's request for more state police officers to assist, and Mexican police increased the number of investigating officers. Residents from the Kilroys' hometown of Santa Fe did what they could to help however they could. Through garage sales and car washes, they raised money to go towards the search efforts. When they could, they made their way south to Matamoros in the valley to pass out flyers that would eventually announce a $15,000 reward. A few days after their visit, the Kilroys had no choice but to drive to Austin to withdraw their son from his university. National attention came to the case on Sunday, March 26, with the TV crime show America's Most Wanted, which outlined the facts of that night in Matamoros with a reenactment. Law enforcement were inundated with new phone calls and letters providing tips, but they didn't find any leads they received worth following. Officials in both the United States and Mexico left no stone possibly unturned. A couple of weeks into the investigation, they began to include black magic as a possible element in Mark's disappearance. A psychic told authorities of a vision that featured Mark's body lying next to what appeared to be a witch's cauldron. A Satanist who lived in Brownsville admitted to murdering him and burying him on the beach, but he would later recant under questioning. Over time, despite their continued perseverance to help find their son, it began to dawn on the Kilroys that they might not find him alive. Ultimately, they just wanted to find Mark's body in order to give him a proper burial. In light of that hope, the pursuit of revenge or justice meant little. With the massive search effort going strong for 2 weeks and very little to show for the influx of tips and grueling interrogations, a body had yet to turn up. Authorities might have already concluded Mark's fate, but it may have taken a miracle to finally get a break in the case. That miracle, or at least something outwardly, came on Saturday the 1st, 1989. At this time, Mexico was in the midst of implementing an extensive anti-drug operation that incorporated 1,200 agents, 30 airplanes, and over 10 helicopters in its efforts along the border. It was routine for the Mexican federal government to set up random, periodic police checkpoints as part of a campaign that cracked down on those involved in drug trafficking. Despite the fact that authorities ran the occasional sweep along the border districts to collect smugglers as part of the campaign, an agent in US Customs had notified federal police in Matamoros that drugs had recently been moved from an area in Mexico, west of Matamoros and into Brownsville. Pressure fell on them to be even more vigilant of drug trafficking activity along the border. A resulting checkpoint guarded by uniformed officers was established at the direction of Mexican Federal Judicial Police Commander Juan Benitez Ayala. It was placed along Mexican Federal Highway 2, a roadway which runs roughly parallel to the Texas-Mexico border, passing through Matamoros westward towards another Tamaulipas border town called Reynosa. It's also a roadway that's easily accessible by anyone leaving or entering Brownsville, Texas. That Saturday, a pickup truck, which apparently had crossed the border from Texas into Mexico, blazed through the checkpoint without stopping or slowing down. It was as though the driver didn't acknowledge the officers at the checkpoint at all, or perhaps they thought it was the other way around. Naturally, police followed the driver, foregoing a police car and sirens for a more discreet, unmarked vehicle instead. Their pursuit took them 20 or so miles west of Matamoros through desert terrain to a remote area. They were ultimately led to a property known as Rancho Santa Elena, located on the other side of the Rio Grande from a small Texas subdivision called El Ranchito. They pulled off the road a safe distance before the truck drove through the entrance of the ranch. After about an hour or so, the truck left the ranch again, back in the direction it came from. Police used the opportunity to quickly search the property. Santa Elena Ranch was a desolate tract of land that was more a farm than anything else, and spotted with just a few rundown shacks. Nothing to write home about. Yet authorities were able to detect traces of marijuana among some occult items. Occult items were not particularly rare or shocking in Mexico. Mexican culture, even in the modern era, has always been rich in magic and superstition, with one foot firmly planted within the world of Catholic Christianity as imported from Europe, and the other embedded in the mysterious and ancient religious rites dating as far back as prehistory. From Aztec sacrifices to the more sober Catholic masses, the importance of ritual is apparent in even the most mundane of life situations. A phone call between friends discussing a family sickness or a trip to a local market will easily steer attention to the availability of amulets, magic potions, or exotic herbs. Brujos and curanderos, or witches and folk healers respectively, bring magical solutions to those looking to attract love or to protect from the evil eye. However, many practitioners could take it to a dark place as well. Authorities had known for a while that this particular ranch was occupied and operated by the Hernandez family drug trafficking syndicate, and had been since the 70s. The drug lord Elio Hernandez Rivera was the leader of the group, while his father Brigido Hernandez owned the ranch. The driver of the truck that disregarded the checkpoint turned out to be a US citizen from Brownsville, Texas. 20-year-old Serafin Hernandez Garcia, also known as Little Serafin. Little Serafin was a low-level yet well-known drug trafficker who was associated with the Hernandez family, not just in business, but in blood. He was in fact the nephew of Elio Hernandez Rivera. Police anticipated a large drug bust at the ranch. They could have taken Serafin immediately, but they decided to continue laying low over the next week, conducting surveillance and building a body of evidence that would tell of any criminal activity that took place on the ranch. They delved deeply into an investigation of the crime syndicate itself. Informants in Matamoros were used to acquire more information to add to the dossier. This would hopefully lead to some key arrests in the investigation. Eventually it did. And on Sunday, April 9, the federal police finally made their move. When they returned to Santa Elena Ranch, they were armed with several additional officers and a search warrant. They arrested Serafin Hernandez Garcia, his uncle Elio Hernandez Rivera, drug dealers David Serna Valdez and Sergio Martinez Salinas, and Domingo Reyes Bustamante, the aging caretaker of Santa Elena Ranch. Hey friends of the show, sorry for a pause in the story, but just a quick reminder to let you know how you can help support the show by becoming a patron. Head on over to patreon.com/truecrimegrapple, and for $1 US a month you can get a shout out on the show with the Assault tier. For $5 a month there is the Murder tier, where we'll have early episodes up every so often and we'll have some bonus content coming your way. So check it out. That's patreon.com/truecrimegrapple. Any donation is greatly appreciated and welcomed. Once again, patreon.com/truecrimegrapple. Many thanks. The men were surprisingly calm in custody, and any remorse they should have displayed was replaced by their defiance as they insisted that a power above the law of man was protecting them. They waited in jail as officers interrogated Bustamante, He admitted that members of the Hernandez outfit would often pay a visit to the property, and he provided their names. Police weren't expecting there to be any connection between the ranch and Mark Kilroy's disappearance. Yet at some point, police showed him a photograph of Mark Kilroy being used on flyers that were circulated as part of his search and left at the police office by Mark's father. However, the caretaker said, quote, "Yes, I saw him." He had seen a young gringo in the equipment yard handcuffed in the back of a Suburban. He indicated one of the shacks that stood in the farm. In either case, the witness never saw him again, nor knew what became of him. After 36 hours of interrogations, all suspects finally began to talk. The Mexican Federal Police notified American officials about it. Serafin was taken in separately and subjected to an interrogation that would last 5 hours. He was informed of the workers' statements, and it didn't take long for him to confirm that Mark was indeed at the ranch and that he had been taken there to be murdered. However, he wasn't the only victim who took his last breaths at Santa Elena Ranch. There have been many more over the course of 9 months, taken specifically for the purposes of religious ritual that centered around human sacrifice. As with often religious rituals, there is often an officiator, some individual who holds a place of power and reverence amongst the group of believers. As for who took the lead in this grisly series of undertakings, Serafin identified the high priest of the ritual as a man named Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo, a charismatic man who was also a long-time palero or practitioner of Palo Mayombe, a syncretic African-Cuban religion that exists in a melding mainly between Catholicism and the African Congo religion. There was a high priestess who was also closely associated with the cult. Her name was Sara Aldrate Villarreal, an intelligent statuesque student who had ties to the Hernandez family. The Hernandez family operated within the state of Tamaulipas as a drug smuggling cabal that reigned ruthlessly over the city of Matamoros and surroundings, with its leader Elio at the helm. They would move as much as 2,000 pounds of marijuana per week over the border via Matamoros and Brownsville. Not a petty shipment. But with all this power and activity would come the need for the gang to protect itself from rivals, either in law or in business, as well as to keep their profits high and ensure lasting prosperity. Adolfo Constanzo was soon hired by the Hernandez family to use black magic in order to shield them from the law during their drug trafficking activities, while ensuring prosperity through their dealings. As a veteran of the occult, Constanzo dealt in protective magic potions and would often sell them to drug dealers. Another benefit to taking these magical potions was the power of invisibility, which is exactly what Serafin believed he had possessed on the day that he drove past the federal checkpoint along Highway 2. The crime family was now a cult, with Constanzo taking the lead. He was known as El Padrino by his followers, which translated to the Godfather. Sara Aldrete was also given the nickname La Madrina, or the Godmother. Serafin said that it was Constanzo who ordered the murders to take place. Sacrificial offerings are an integral element to Palomayombe, and the central object that receives them as a consecrated cauldron-like pot known as Nganga. Continuously feeding this vessel ensures that Palero's spells will work, or that they'll work exponentially. Live sacrifices of animals can be performed to feed Nganga or else human bones. But with an operation like the Hernandez drug smuggling ring, the spells to ensure maximum invincibility and wealth had to be particularly powerful. In Constanzo's eyes, this could only be achieved with live human sacrifices. He would torture and sodomize them before killing them and then removing their organs to feed his Nganga. Seraphin would go on to say that, quote, "It was our religion, our voodoo. We did it for success. We did it for protection." Seraphin was made a priest by Elio, but he seemed to not know fully what he'd gotten himself into. He just went along for the ride. Seraphin recounted the story of how they crossed paths with Mark Kilroy and eventually sealed his fate. It was Seraphin's job to help abduct Mark and bring him back to the ranch. The cult members were instructed by Constanzo to select an Anglo spring breaker for their next sacrifice. But it wouldn't do for them to find just anyone. They were to find one who had a superior brain. On the last evening that Mark and his friends visited Matamoros, they drove a red pickup truck along Avenida Alvaro Obregón, the main thoroughfare that featured the bars and clubs that most often drew tourists. This was the easiest street to find a white male because of its obviously popularity with American students partying for spring break. They'd spotted Mark Kilroy standing on the street, and with his fit stature, blonde hair and wholesome good looks, he must have seemed like the perfect pick. They'd asked him if he wanted a ride. As he got nearer to them, Seraphin and a fellow gangster, Malio Fabio Ponce Torres, grabbed him and forced him into the back of the truck with them. They didn't get more than a few blocks before Seraphin had to make a pit stop to relieve himself. Being a strong and athletic young man, Mark took the opportunity to wrest himself from the gang and escape. He ran for 2 blocks but was quickly intercepted by another car, a Suburban carrying more members of the Hernandez gang. They had joined the red truck that night to search for a sacrifice. They hustled Mark by gunpoint to the Suburban and handcuffed him in the back. The vehicles drove the back roads of Matamoros and made their way out into the rural darkness. The cars curved and wound their ways along the dirt roads past cornfield after cornfield, the city gradually becoming just a dimly glowing patch in the distance. The vehicles arrived at the ranch and parked near a shack flanked with farm equipment on one side and an irrigation levee on the other. Instead of taking them indoors, Mark was left tethered on the back of a car all night without seeing the men again. One of their assurances surely resounded through his head, and it was that no harm would come to him. By dawn, the ranch's caretaker met Mark and fed him bread, water, and eggs. In the early afternoon, 12 hours or so after his abduction, Constanzo led the men out to the car where Mark was being kept. They wrapped his mouth and eyes with heavy duct tape, and they led him, with his hands bound, across a field to one of the shacks. Inside the shack, amid a stench of rotting flesh, Mark was brutally tortured and sodomized for hours. At one point, Constanzo sent a blow to the back of his neck and head with a machete, killing him. They then used the machete to lop off the top of his head and remove his brain for the ritual. They placed it in the inganga with boiling blood per Constanzo's instruction. The cauldron included other disturbing ingredients like a horseshoe, a tortoiseshell, and a human spine. They also ripped Mark's heart from his chest and drained his blood. After death, Mark was buried in a shallow grave, only 3 feet deep. Just as it was Seraphine's duty to help kidnap Mark, he was also made responsible for burying his body after the machete blow to the head, which claimed his life. His legs were amputated at the thigh. This decision to dismember had no ritualistic meaning, but did make a burial more efficient. Before Seraphine had buried Mark, the gangsters attached a coat wire hanger to his spinal column. In this way, after his body finished decomposing, they would be able to pull the spine out of the ground and fashion the vertebral bones into a necklace. All the drug traffickers questioned said they personally had no role in the murders of any of the victims. Constanzo wouldn't allow them to. On the other hand, Elio Hernandez Rivera said that Constanzo had chosen him as a second-in-command occult executioner. His body bore the appointment in the form of symbols branded across his torso with the searing blade of a knife. It would be nearly a month's full search after Mark Kilroy went missing in Matamoros before anyone would see him again. On Tuesday, April 11th, after Elio, Serafin, David Cerner Valdez and Sergio Martinez Salinas had confessed to the horrors that took place on Santa Elena Ranch, law enforcement gathered them up for a trip back to the property. Upon request of the authorities, Little Serafin readily led them to the precise spot where Mark's body was buried. Where they stopped, a length of a coat hanger wire emerged from the disturbed earth. Mark Kilroy's shallow grave was just one of many that made up the impromptu cemetery. Given shovels, Serafin and the other 3 men spent hours at gunpoint, beaten by the afternoon sun as they uncovered graves one by one. Eventually, 12 bodies lay side by side in a row, including that of Mark Kilroy. Through the serial examinations, Serafin, Elio and their associates were nonchalant at worst, annoyed by their forced labour at most. All victims were male, and further investigation showed the various ways in which the victims had been ended. Some died similarly by the shot of a close-range bullet. Some were hanged. The deaths of others were more agonising and included being hacked to death by a machete, even skinned alive. One body showed signs that it had been charred. Some had clearly been castrated, with other organs missing as well, such as hearts, brains and limbs. In the case of Mark, his skull was split open and his brain was missing, a chilling confirmation of Serafin's earlier confession. However, his official identification came when Brownsville police positively matched the teeth of the body found against Mark's dental records. At the conclusion of the examination, A total of 15 terribly mutilated, decomposing bodies were found, 3 of which couldn't be identified. It was determined that most of the victims were not random picks for sacrificial ritual, but known rival drug dealers instead. One of the victims, a young boy about 14 years old, was murdered and sacrificed by mistake. Okay folks, sorry to do this to you, but we're going to take a break in the case and come back to you with part 2 as soon as possible. Find our Facebook page at True Crime Grapple and request to join, because I may well get part 2 out earlier than expected, and you can find updates there as well and join in the conversations. Till next time, I've been your host Dan, and stay safe out there.